Amy Collins had been on Prime for 3 months, and she still could not get used to the teeth. They were beautiful in their own way, with sleek fur that caught the light and eyes that glowed like embers, but those teeth made her stomach clench every time they smiled. Not that they smiled often. Not at humans, anyway. She walked through the diplomatic station's garden, checking the flowering plants that had been brought from Earth. The gardens were her responsibility, a small task for a junior, but Amy did not mind. It was peaceful here, away from the tension that filled the rest of the station. They did not think much of humans. They made that clear in every interaction, every dismissive glance, every turn back. The morning sun was warm on her face as she knelt beside a bed of blue flowers. Ambassador Gregory Hart had told her to stay focused on the plants and avoid unnecessary contact with the— "We're guests here," he had said. "Let's not make waves." Amy understood. Humanity had fought hard to get even limited access to Prime. They were powerful, their technology advanced, and their territory stretched across 12-star systems. They saw humans as weak, prey animals, something to be tolerated but never respected. She was checking the soil moisture when she heard it. A small sound, barely more than a whimper, coming from beneath the flowering shrubs near the east wall. Amy froze, listening. There it was again, soft and frightened. She moved slowly, carefully pushing aside the broad leaves. Her breath caught in her throat. A cub huddled against the wall, its small body trembling. The youngling could not have been more than a few months old, with pale fur that was matted with dirt and blood. Cuts covered its front legs, and one ear was torn. Its golden eyes were wide with fear. "Oh no," Amy whispered. "What happened to you?" The cub flinched at her voice, trying to press itself further into the wall. Amy's heart broke. She had studied behavior for months before coming here. She knew that cubs were precious to them, protected fiercely by their packs. For one to be alone and injured like this meant something had gone terribly wrong. She should call someone, report the cub to the authorities. That would be the proper diplomatic thing to do. But the cub was bleeding. It was scared and small, and Amy could not just walk away. "It's okay," she said softly, keeping her voice low and calm. "I'm not going to hurt you." The cub watched her with those frightened eyes as she slowly reached for the water bottle on her belt. She poured a little into her cupped hand and held it out, staying very still. The youngling's nose twitched. It was clearly thirsty, but afraid to come closer. Amy waited. Patience was important with frightened animals, human or alien. Her father had taught her that when she was young, helping him with injured wildlife back on Earth. After what felt like forever, the cub crept forward. Its small pink tongue lapped at the water in her palm. Amy could feel it trembling, could see every rib beneath its thin fur. "That's it," she murmured. "Good, you're safe now." When the water was gone, the cub looked up at her. Something in its expression changed. The fear was still there, but there was also desperate need. This baby was lost and alone, and every instinct Amy had told her to help. She carefully removed her jacket and spread it on the ground. Then, moving very slowly, she reached for the cub. It did not run. When her hands touched its fur, she felt it shaking harder, but it did not pull away. Amy lifted the youngling as gently as she could. It was lighter than she expected, much too light. She wrapped her jacket around its small body and held it against her chest. The cub's heartbeat was racing, a rapid flutter against her. "I've got you," she said. "You're going to be okay." The cub made a small sound and pressed its face into her shoulder. Amy felt its body slowly relax as her warmth soaked into it. She stood carefully and started walking toward the medical bay. Her mind was already working through the problems this would cause. They would be angry that a human had touched one of their young. Ambassador Hart would be furious that she had interfered. There would be meetings and explanations, and possibly an incident that could damage human relations with Prime. None of that mattered. This was a child, hurt and scared and alone. Dr. Helen Price looked up from her work when Amy entered the medical bay. The older woman's eyes went wide when she saw what Amy was carrying. "Please tell me that's not what I think it is," Helen said. "He was hiding in the garden," Amy replied. "He's injured and dehydrated." Helen stood quickly, her professional instincts taking over despite the clear concern on her face. "Put him on the exam table, carefully." Amy tried to set the cub down, but it would not let go. Its small claws dug into her shirt, and it made a distressed chirping sound. "He doesn't want to leave you," Helen observed. "I know." Amy sat on the exam table instead, keeping the cub in her arms. Can you treat him like this?" Helen sighed but nodded. She brought over her medical scanner and began working around Amy, checking the cub's injuries. "These cuts aren't deep, but they're infected. He's severely underweight. Dehydration is a concern too." "Can you help him?" Amy asked. "I can treat the immediate problems," Helen said. "But Amy, we have to report this. That's a cub. His family will be looking for him." "I know, but we can make sure he's stable first, right?" Helen met her eyes. There was understanding there and something like respect. "Yes, we can do that." As Helen worked, Amy held the cub close. She could feel it relaxing more, its breathing becoming slower and more even. It trusted her. This tiny alien child, who should have been afraid of the strange creature holding it, felt safe in her arms. Amy knew she was breaking protocol. She knew there would be consequences. But when the cub made a small, contented sound and nestled closer to her chest, she also knew she had made the right choice. The alarm came 3 hours later. Amy was still in the medical bay, sitting in a chair with the cub curled in her lap. Helen had treated the wounds and given the youngling fluids through a small IV. The cub was sleeping now, one paw resting on Amy's arm, breathing softly. "Shuttle approaching the station," the intercom announced. "Multiple signatures, military configuration." Helen's face went pale. That was fast. Amy's heart started pounding, but she kept her hands steady as she stroked the cub's fur. "They're coming for him." "Amy, you need to understand something." Helen moved closer, her voice low and urgent. "They don't think like us. They have rules about pack hierarchy that are absolute. An alpha's authority cannot be questioned. If the cub's father is on that shuttle and if he's an alpha, you cannot challenge him. Do you understand? You give them what they want and you step back." "I understand," Amy said, but her arms tightened slightly around the sleeping cub. Ambassador Hart burst into the medical bay moments later, his face flushed. "Collins, please tell me you didn't touch a cub." Amy met his eyes. "I found him injured in the garden. I gave him water and brought him here for medical treatment." "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Hart ran a hand through his hair. "That shuttle carries Alpha. Do you know who that is?" Amy shook her head. "He's one of the most powerful pack leaders on this planet. His territory covers half the northern continent. He has killed challengers with his bare hands, and you have his son." The cub stirred in Amy's arms, making a small sound. She shushed him gently, and he settled back into sleep. "I was helping an injured child," she said quietly. "You were interfering with business." Hart's voice was sharp. "When gets here, you will hand over the cub immediately. No discussion, no delay. We cannot afford an incident." "The cub is injured," Amy said. "He needs care." "That's not our concern. Their medics can handle it." "He was alone and bleeding in our garden. That makes it our concern." Hart's jaw tightened. "That's an order, Collins. You hand over the cub when arrives. End of discussion." Before Amy could respond, the medical bay doors slid open. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Alpha was bigger than any Amy had seen. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his shoulders broad and powerful. His fur was midnight black, and his eyes glowed amber in the station's lights. Behind him stood 6 warriors, all watching the humans with expressions that ranged from contempt to open hostility. The Alpha's presence filled the room like a physical force. Amy had read about predator species, about the way they could project dominance, but reading about it was nothing like experiencing it. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run, to hide, to submit. His gaze swept the room and locked onto her. His lips pulled back slightly, showing teeth that could tear through metal. He spoke in the language, his voice a deep rumble that resonated in Amy's chest. Her translation implant kicked in a second later, converting his words. "You hold my son, give him to me, now." The cub woke at his father's voice. Instead of reaching for, the youngling made a frightened sound and pressed harder against Amy's chest, trying to burrow into her arms. His eyes narrowed. He took a step forward and Amy saw his claws extend. Each one was as long as her finger, razor-sharp and clearly deadly. "Give him to me." Each word was separate, heavy with warning. Ambassador Hart moved forward quickly. "Alpha, please accept our sincere apologies. We meant no disrespect. We were simply protecting your son until you arrived. We will return him immediately." Did not look at Hart. His entire focus was on Amy and the cub. Amy's mouth was dry. Her hands were shaking. She could feel the cub trembling against her, could hear the small, frightened sounds it was making. The youngling was terrified. She really looked at him, past the teeth and the claws and the overwhelming physical threat. She saw the tension in his massive frame, the way his eyes kept flicking to the cub, the barely controlled violence in every line of his body. He was afraid, not of her certainly, but he was afraid for his son. This was a father who had lost his child and just gotten him back. A father who was wound so tight with fear and relief that he was one wrong move away from exploding. "Alpha," Amy said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Your son is safe. I treated his wounds, but he's scared right now." The room went dead silent. The warriors stiffened. Hart made a strangled sound. His growl deepened, a sound that vibrated through the floor. He took another step forward, and Amy could smell him now, a wild scent like storms and steel. "Collins," Hart hissed, "hand over the cub right now." Amy looked down at the small bundle in her arms. The cub was watching her with those golden eyes, trusting her to keep him safe. She had made a promise to this child when she found him in the garden. She had told him he would be okay. She looked back at, "I will give him back to you. He's your son, but not while you're like this. You're scaring him." The warriors behind shifted, hands moving toward weapons. Helen grabbed the edge of the exam table, her face white. Hart looked like he might have a heart attack. Went completely still. For a long moment nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then the Alpha spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "You dare command me, you who are prey, who are weak." Every part of Amy wanted to back down, to apologize, to give the cub over and end this before killed her. But she thought about the youngling's injuries, the way he had been alone and hurt. She thought about what kind of father would let that happen, would come in here radiating violence when his son needed comfort. She stood up slowly, keeping the cub close to her chest. Her legs felt weak, but she locked her knees and forced herself to meet his burning gaze. "I'm not commanding you," she said. "I'm asking you to think about your son. Look at him. He's afraid. If you want him to trust you again, to feel safe with you, you need to stop acting like a threat." His claws scraped against the metal floor as his hands clenched into fists. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard. "You know nothing of my kind," he snarled. "Nothing of strength, of pack law." "You're right," Amy said. "I don't, but I know fear when I see it, and your son is afraid right now, not of me, of you." The cub whimpered as if understanding. His eyes flicked to his son and something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or shame. "I am his father," said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "He should not fear me." "Then show him he doesn't need to," Amy replied. She was shaking now, really shaking, but she did not step back. "You're strong, I can see that. Everyone can see that, but being strong enough to hurt isn't the same as being strong enough to protect." The medical bay was so quiet Amy could hear her own heartbeat. Stared at her, his expression unreadable. His warriors watched with open shock. Then slowly the Alpha's claws retracted. His shoulders lowered slightly. The Amy could feel every eye in the room on her. The human security officers near the door had their hands on their weapons, though she knew those would be useless against if he decided to attack. Helen was frozen by the medical equipment, barely breathing. Ambassador Hart looked like he was mentally writing her obituary. The warriors were completely still, their expressions a mixture of shock and confusion. One of them, a female with rust-colored fur, had her jaw hanging slightly open. But Amy's focus was entirely on. The massive Alpha stood less than 10 feet away, his amber eyes locked on hers. She had just told him, essentially, that he was failing as a father. She had challenged his approach in front of his warriors and in front of witnesses from her own species. By law, as she understood it, that should have earned her a swift death. Instead, was watching her with something that looked almost like curiosity. "You are small," he said finally. His voice had dropped lower, losing some of the sharp edge of rage. "Your kind has no claws, no fangs, your bones break easily, your skin tears like paper." "Yes," Amy agreed. There was no point in denying it. "You cannot fight me. You cannot win against me. You know this." "I know. Yet you stand between me and my son. Why?" Amy shifted her hold on the cub, feeling his small body pressed against her chest. His heartbeat was still fast, but not as frantic as before. "Because he needs someone to stand for him right now, because he's hurt and scared, because that's what you do for children." Tilted his head, studying her. "On your world, you protect young that are not your own." Yes, all children, not just our own species. Even when it puts you in danger. Amy thought about the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center where she had volunteered as a teenager. The time she had helped her father rescue a wolf cub from a trap, knowing the mother might be nearby. The way her mother had once stopped traffic to help ducklings cross a road. Especially then, she said. One of the warriors made a sound, something between a grunt and a laugh, silenced him with a glance, then turned back to Amy. My son was taken during a territorial dispute, said. His voice carried a weight of pain beneath the words. Two packs fought. In the chaos, he wandered away. When I realized he was gone, I tracked him here. I thought your kind had stolen him. Understanding clicked into place. You thought we took him to use as leverage. It is what others would do. Ears flattened slightly. It is what I might have done in different circumstances. We didn't take him, Amy said firmly. I found him hiding in the garden, injured and alone. I gave him water and brought him here so Dr. Price could treat his wounds. That's all. Was quiet for a long moment. His gaze moved to the cub, taking in the bandages on the small legs, the IV line, the way his son was nestled safely in Amy's arms. You say I frighten him, the alpha said. Right now, yes, you're angry. He can feel that. I am angry at myself, at those who let him wander, at the fear I felt when I could not find him. His massive hands clenched and unclenched. But not at him, never at him. Then show him that, Amy said gently. Let him see his father, not the alpha. They are the same. No, they're not. His eyes flashed. For a moment, Amy thought she had pushed too far. Then the alpha did something unexpected. He lowered himself down, sitting on his haunches so that his head was closer to Amy's level. The change in height made him less imposing, though he was still clearly dangerous. Explain, he commanded, but his tone was less harsh. Amy took a breath. Being an alpha means being strong for your pack, leading them, protecting them. But your son doesn't need an alpha right now. He needs his dad. He needs to know that you're here because you love him, not because he broke a rule or caused a problem. He did cause a problem. He wandered away from the pack during a dangerous situation. He's a baby, Amy said. Bobbies make mistakes. They get scared and do things they shouldn't. That doesn't mean they deserve to be treated like criminals. Was silent again. Amy could see him thinking, processing. The other were watching their alpha with obvious confusion. This was clearly not how these situations normally went. You speak strangely for prey, one of the warriors said. It was the female with rust-colored fur. With no respect for your position. I speak for someone who can't speak for himself, Amy replied, keeping her eyes on, and with respect for what's right. The warrior hissed, but raised one hand, silencing her. What is your name? The alpha asked Amy. Amy Collins. Amy Collins, he said it slowly as if testing the sounds. You are not afraid to die. I'm terrified, Amy admitted. Her voice shook slightly, betraying the fear she had been trying to hide. I can barely stand up. My hands won't stop shaking. I keep thinking about how fast you could kill me. Yet you do not move. You do not give me my son and flee. No. Why not? Amy looked down at the cub in her arms. His golden eyes were watching her, so trusting and innocent. Because he's counting on me, and I don't abandon people who are counting on me. Made a sound deep in his chest. Not a growl exactly, something else. He slowly extended one massive paw toward Amy, palm up in what she recognized from her studies as a peaceful gesture. Will he come to me if you encourage him? Asked. It was the first time the alpha had asked for something instead of demanding it. Amy felt a small spark of hope. Let me try, she said. She adjusted her hold on the cub, turning him gently so he could see his father better. Kept very still, his paw extended, his posture as non-threatening as a creature his size could manage. Look, Amy said softly to the youngling. Your dad is here. He came to find you. He was so worried about you. The cub's ears twitched. His small nose wrinkled as he scented the air, catching his father's smell. Spoke then in the language. Amy's translator caught some of it. Apologies, endearments, promises of safety. The alpha's voice was completely different now, gentle and warm, nothing like the threatening growl from before. The cub made a small chirping sound. His tiny paw reached toward, stretching but not quite able to reach from Amy's arms. It's okay, Amy encouraged. You're safe with him. She took a careful step forward, closing the distance between herself and Every instinct screamed at her to run the other direction, but she pushed through the fear. When she was close enough, she held the cub out slightly, supporting his small body as he stretched toward his father. Moved with incredible gentleness for such a large creature. His huge paw cupped around his son's small one, and the cub gripped his father's finger with surprising strength. The change in the youngling was immediate. His whole body relaxed. He made happy chirping sounds and climbed out of Amy's arms, scrambling onto his father's broad chest. Caught his son with both paws, holding him close. The alpha's eyes closed for a moment, and Amy saw his whole body shudder with relief. When he opened his eyes again, there was moisture in them. He nuzzled the top of the cub's head, making low rumbling sounds that the translator identified as expressions of love and comfort. The cub burrowed into his father's fur, finally home and safe. Amy stepped back, giving them space. Her legs felt like water now that the adrenaline was fatting. She reached out blindly and found the exam table, leaning against it for support. Stood slowly, cradling his son against his chest. He looked at Amy over the cub's head, and his expression was completely different now. The rage was gone. In its place was something that looked like respect. "You challenged me," said quietly. "An alpha in front of my warriors." "Yes," Amy said, too tired to be anything but honest. "By our law, that should mean your death." Hart made a strangled noise. The human security officers tensed. Lips pulled back, but this time it was not a threat. It was something closer to a smile. "But you did not challenge my authority," the alpha continued. "You challenged me to be better." To the medical bay remained silent as words hung in the air. Amy's mind struggled to process what had just happened. She had expected anger, violence, possibly death. Instead, the most feared alpha on Prime was thanking her. The warriors were staring at their leader with expressions of pure disbelief. The rust-furred female looked like she might faint. Even Ambassador Hart seemed at a loss for words, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Shifted his hold on his son, supporting the cub's small body with one massive arm while extending his other paw toward Amy. She looked at the offered hand, confused. "Among my people," explained, "when two warriors show mutual respect, they mark it with contact. A hand to forearm, it signifies equals meeting in honor." "But I'm not a warrior," Amy said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant and shaky. "You stood before an alpha to protect a child. You faced death without retreat. You had no weapons but your courage, and you used it to make me see truth." The amber eyes were steady. "That is a warrior's heart, Amy Collins. Species does not matter. Strength takes many forms." Amy looked at the extended paw, at the claws that could tear her apart, at the scars that marked his forearm, evidence of battles fought and won. Then she looked at the cub nestled against his father's chest, safe and content. She reached out and gripped his forearm. His paw closed around hers with surprising gentleness, careful not to hurt her with his greater strength. "I accept your respect," Amy said, "and I offer mine in return." The moment held, human and prey and predator. Two beings from different worlds, connected by the simple act of protecting a child. When released her arm, he turned to face his warriors. They immediately straightened, their casual postures shifting to attention. "You have witnessed something today," said, his voice carrying the authority of an alpha addressing his pack. "You have seen prey stand tall. You have seen weakness become strength. What does this teach you?" The warriors exchanged glances. The rust-furred female spoke first, her voice hesitant. "That humans are not what we believed them to be, Alpha." "More than that," said. He looked down at his son, who was nearly asleep again, exhausted from fear and relief. "We have judged their kind by our standards, by claws and fangs and size. We called them weak because they have none of these things, but we were wrong." He turned back to Amy. "You could not fight me, but you did not need to. You won without violence. You changed the outcome with words and courage and understanding. That is a kind of strength we have forgotten to value." One of the other warriors, a large male with streaking through his dark fur, stepped forward. "Alpha, if I may speak." Nodded. This human showed great bravery, but she is still one individual. Her kind are still small, still fragile. Surely this does not change what they are as a species. "Does it not?" challenged. He gestured to Amy. "Tell them, when you found my son injured and alone, what did you feel?" Amy thought about that moment in the garden. "I felt sad and worried. I wanted to help him." "Did you think about the diplomatic consequences?" The danger to yourself. Not really, Amy admitted. I just saw a hurt child who needed help. And if it had been a human child, would you have done differently? No, I would have helped the same way. Looked at his warriors. You see, she did not help because my son she did not calculate advantage or risk. She helped because it was a child in need. This is not weakness. This is a strength we lack. We protect our own pack, yes. But these humans protect all young, regardless of species or benefit to themselves. The streaked warrior frowned, considering this. That seems inefficient. Why waste resources on young that are not your own? Because it's the right thing to do, Amy said before she could stop herself. All turned to look at her. She swallowed hard but continued. On Earth, we learned a long time ago that protecting only our own tribe, our own group, led to terrible things. War, genocide, suffering. We're not perfect at it, but we try to see all people as deserving of help, all children as deserving of protection. Even your enemy's children? The warrior asked. Especially our enemy's children, because they didn't choose the conflict, they're just caught in it. Made an approving rumble. You see, this perspective, this compassion across species lines, it is something we do not have. We have strength, yes, power, technology, but we have grown so focused on hierarchy and dominance that we have lost sight of other values. He turned to Ambassador Hart, who had been watching the entire exchange with wide eyes. Ambassador, I came here expecting to find my son held hostage. I came prepared for violence. Instead, I found him being cared for by someone who asked nothing in return, someone who risked everything to ensure his. Hart cleared his throat. Alpha, we are grateful for your understanding. I apologize for any distress caused by the situation. You apologize for nothing, said firmly. If anything, I must apologize. My people have treated yours with contempt since you arrived on our world. We called you prey, weak, unworthy of respect. We were wrong. I was wrong. The Alpha's words fell like stones in still water, ripples of shock spreading through everyone present. I will take this truth back to the High Council, continued. I will tell them what I witnessed here, how a small human with no weapons and no defenses stood before me and won, not through violence but through courage and compassion and wisdom. He looked at Amy again. You have changed how I see your kind, Amy Collins, and I am not easy to convince. Amy felt tears prickling at her eyes. She blinked them back, not wanting to seem weak now. Thank you, Alpha. No, thank you for saving my son, for teaching me to see past my anger, for showing me that strength wears many faces. The cub stirred its arms, making a small sound. The Alpha immediately focused on his son, murmuring comfort in the language. The youngling's eyes opened, and he looked around until he found Amy. A small smile crossed his face, and he reached one paw toward her. He wants you, said, surprise in his voice. Amy stepped closer and gently touched the cub's outstretched paw. The youngling's fingers wrapped around one of hers, holding on. He is young, said softly, but he will remember this, remember you. Among my people, debts of life are sacred. You saved him, cared for him when he was alone and afraid. That creates a bond that does not break. I don't need anything in return, Amy said. I'm just glad he's okay. That is why the debt matters, replied. You ask for nothing, expect nothing. That makes the owing even greater. He paused, then continued in a more formal tone. Amy Collins, by the ancient laws of my people, I name you pack friend. You are under my protection. Any who threaten you threaten my pack. Any who harm you answer to me. This I swear by tooth and claw and the blood of my ancestors. The warriors all made a gesture, touching their claws to their chests in what Amy recognized as a salute of acknowledgement. I don't know what that means, Amy admitted. Pack friend. The rust-furred female spoke up. It means you are considered part of the Alpha's extended pack, not but connected to us. It is rarely given, never to outsiders, never to another species. Until now, said, he shifted his son to his other arm and extended his paw again. This time, when Amy took it, he drew her closer. My pack is your pack. My protection is your protection. You need only call and we will answer. Amy looked into those amber eyes and saw sincerity there. Truth. This fierce predator who could have killed her without effort was offering her something precious to his kind. I accept, she said, with gratitude and respect. Nodded, good, now I should take my son home. He needs rest and proper food. But we will return, Amy Collins, to visit, to learn more about your kind, to teach my son about the human who saved him. He turned to leave, his warriors falling into formation around him. At the door he paused and looked back. You stood tall when I challenged you, said. Even though you were afraid, even though I could have ended you, that took more courage than most warriors show in a lifetime. Remember that, Amy Collins. Remember that you have strength even your own kind may not recognize, and know that they will not forget it either. Then he was gone, his warriors following, leaving the humans standing in stunned silence. The medical bay erupted into chaos the moment the door closed behind and his warriors. What just happened? One of the security officers asked, looking between Amy and Ambassador Hart. Helen grabbed Amy's arm, steadying her as her legs finally gave out. Amy sat down hard on the exam table, her whole body shaking now that the danger had passed. You're insane, Helen said, but there was affection in her voice. Completely insane. Do you know what you just did? I helped a child, Amy said weakly. You challenged an alpha and lived. You made him back down. You made him apologize. Helen shook her head in disbelief. Nobody does that, nobody. Ambassador Hart was packing, his hands clasped behind his back. This is unprecedented. Pack friend, I've never even heard of that title being offered to a non. Do you understand what this means politically? No, Amy admitted. Her hands were still shaking. Now that the adrenaline was fatting, she felt exhausted. Hart stopped packing and looked at her. It means you just changed human relations more in one afternoon than we've managed in 3 years of careful diplomacy. Is one of the most respected alphas on this planet. If he tells the High Council that humans deserve respect, they'll listen. I wasn't thinking about politics, Amy said. I was thinking about a scared cub. I know, that's what makes it so powerful. Hart's expression softened. You did something remarkable today, Collins, terrifying and reckless but remarkable. Over the next few days, word of what happened spread through the diplomatic station and beyond. The other on Prime heard about the human who had stood against Alpha. Some dismissed it as rumor. Others came to the station to see Amy for themselves, as if checking whether such a small creature could really have done what the stories claimed. Amy tried to go back to her normal routine, tending the gardens and assisting with research. But nothing felt normal anymore. Who had previously ignored her now watched with open curiosity. Some even nodded to her in passing, a gesture of acknowledgement they had never offered before. On the third day after the incident, returned. Amy was in the garden when she heard the familiar sound of his heavy footsteps. She looked up to see the massive alpha approaching, with his son trotting beside him on small but steady legs. The cub's wounds had healed, leaving only faint scars beneath his fur. Amy, the cub chirped, the first human word he had learned. He bounded forward and crashed into her legs, wrapping his small arms around her knees. Amy laughed and knelt down to hug him properly. Hello, little one, you look so much better. The cub chittered happily, showing her a small flower he had clutched in one paw. For you, found it. Thank you, it's beautiful. Amy took the somewhat crushed flower and tucked it behind her ear. The cub's eyes went wide with delight. Watched the interaction with an expression Amy was learning to read, something warm and approving. He has talked of nothing but visiting you, the alpha said. Every day he asks when we can come see the human who saved him. What's his name? Amy asked. I've been calling him Little One, but I'd like to know his real name. It means strength in our language. I had hoped he would grow into it. Amber eyes reflected sunlight as he looked at his son. After what happened, I think he will. He's already strong, Amy said. He survived being lost and hurt. He trusted me even though I was a stranger. That takes courage. Beamed at the praise, puffing out his small chest, made a sound that Amy recognized as laughter. You are good for him, the alpha said. Good for all of us, I think. Over the following weeks became a regular visitor to the station. He brought other with him, introducing them to Amy and the other humans. Some were curious, others skeptical, but all were civil. The casual contempt that had marked earlier interactions was gone. Came with his father every time, bringing gifts for Amy. Flowers, interesting stones, small carved figures that cubs made as learning exercises. Amy kept them all in her quarters, a growing collection of friendship from a child who had changed her life. The changes went beyond personal relationships. The High Council summoned Ambassador Hart for a formal meeting. Attended as well, speaking before the assembled alphas about what he had witnessed. He told them about Amy's courage, about her compassion, about the strength humans showed through means they had never valued. 2 months after the incident in the medical bay, the High Council announced a new policy. Humans would be granted expanded access to Prime. Trade agreements would be negotiated. Cultural exchange programs would begin. The council stated, recognized that they had much to learn from humanity about different forms of strength. Amy received a formal commendation from Earth's diplomatic corps. Her actions, they said, had opened doors that years of traditional diplomacy could not. She was offered a promotion, a transfer to a more prestigious posting, recognition that would advance her career. She turned it all down. She wanted to stay on Prime, working with building the friendships and understanding that had started with one frightened cub in a garden. 6 months after that day in the medical bay, Amy sat in the station's observation lounge, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Was curled up beside her, drowsing after a long day of playing in the gardens. Sat nearby, discussing philosophy with Helen and 2 other scholars. "You changed everything, you know," Helen said quietly, moving to sit beside Amy. "When you stood up to that day, when you chose to protect instead of protecting yourself." "I just did what felt right," Amy replied, stroking soft fur. "That's my point. You didn't calculate. You didn't think about consequences or benefits. You just saw someone who needed help and you helped them. That's what humanity does best. That's what makes us special." Amy looked around the lounge. Humans and talking together, laughing together, sharing ideas and stories. It would have been impossible just months ago. "We're not that special," she said. "We're just people doing our best." "Exactly," Helen smiled. "And sometimes doing your best means standing up to a predator twice your size because it's the right thing to do, even when you're terrified, even when you know you might die." Stirred and looked up at Amy with sleepy golden eyes. "Story?" he asked hopefully. "Tell story about brave human." "Which story do you want?" Amy asked, though she knew the answer. It was always the same. "Your story when you saved me, when you stood tall." Amy sighed but smiled. "All right, one more time." As she began the familiar tale, a deep voice joined in from across the room. "Make sure you tell the part where I was wrong," he said. "That is the most important part." "You weren't wrong," Amy protested. "You were scared for your son, that's not wrong." "I was wrong to let fear make me blind," corrected. "Wrong to come in with claws and anger instead of opening my eyes and seeing truth. You taught me that. A small human with no weapons and every reason to be afraid. You taught an alpha to see differently." Was nodding even though his eyes were half closed. "Amy brave, Amy strong." "Amy was terrified," she corrected gently. "But I stood anyway. That's what courage is. Not the absence of fear, but doing what's right despite the fear." "Wise words," one of the scholars said. "This is what we must teach our young. That strength comes in many forms. That compassion is not weakness. That sometimes the bravest thing is to stand still and speak truth to power." The conversation continued as the sun set completely, replaced by the soft glow of station lights and the distant stars. Amy listened to the mix of human and voices, to the sound of different species learning from each other, and felt a deep sense of contentment. She had come to Prime as a junior, expecting to study alien plants and stay out of the way. Instead, she had become a bridge between 2 species, a symbol of what humanity could offer the galaxy. Not superior technology or military might, but something simpler and more profound. The courage to care, even when it was dangerous. The strength to stand for what was right, even when standing seemed impossible. Fell asleep against her side, purring softly. Amy looked down at him and remembered the frightened, injured cub she had found in the garden. She remembered the moment she had decided to help him, knowing it might cost her everything. She would make the same choice again, 1,000 times over. Because that was what it meant to be human. Not to be fearless, but to choose courage anyway. Not to be invincible, but to stand tall even when the odds were impossible. Not to be perfect, but to try always to do what was right. Caught her eye across the room and nodded, a gesture of respect between equals. Amy nodded back. The galaxy was vast and full of species stronger than humanity. Faster, more advanced, more powerful in every measurable way, but humanity had something else. Something that couldn't be measured in claws or technology or size. They had heart, they had compassion. They had the courage to stand between danger and innocence, to face down threats they couldn't hope to defeat, to choose mercy over fear. And sometimes, in a universe of predators and prey, of hierarchies and power that made all the difference. Amy looked out at the stars and smiled. Somewhere out there, humanity was taking its first steps into a larger galactic community. They would face challenges, conflicts, species who would underestimate them, dismiss them, see them as weak. But Amy had learned something important that day in the medical bay. She had learned that being underestimated was its own kind of advantage. That being seen as weak meant you could surprise people when you showed strength. That sometimes the greatest victories came not from fighting, but from refusing to back down. She had stood tall when challenged. She had protected the vulnerable. She had chosen compassion over fear. That was the human way, and it was enough. Murmured in his sleep, snuggling closer. Amy held him gently, this small alien child who had trusted her, and felt the weight of what that trust meant. The future was uncertain. The galaxy was dangerous. But in this moment, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky while humans and shared space and stories, Amy felt hope. Not hope for easy days or simple solutions, but hope that maybe, just maybe, humanity's greatest strength would be enough. That courage and compassion could open doors that force never could. That standing tall in the face of fear could change not just one life, but many. One frightened cub, one terrified human, one moment of choosing right over safety. Sometimes that was all it took to change a world. See past my anger, to remember what my son needed. He paused, his amber eyes holding hers. No one has dared to do that in many years. I just wanted him to feel safe, Amy said. You made me see him, not as a problem to be solved or a weakness to be corrected, as my child, frightened and needing his father's comfort. Bowed his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. For that, Amy Collins, you have my thanks and my respect. Posture eased just a fraction. It was a small change, but it was something. Amy took a careful breath and tried not to pass out from the adrenaline flooding her system. She had just challenged an alpha. She had stood her ground against a predator who could kill her in seconds. And somehow, impossibly, she was still alive. What she did not know was that within hours, Alpha would arrive at the station. She did not know that the most feared pack leader on Prime was this cub's father. And she certainly did not know that she would soon be standing face to face with a predator who could tear her apart with one swipe of his claws. All she knew in that moment was that the small life pressed against her heart needed her, and Amy Collins had never been able to walk away from something that needed help. Even if it might cost her everything,